We're here with Josh Weltman. So Josh is a 25-year veteran of the advertising business, a working creative director, a co-producer, a writer, and an artist. He's a real-life madman. He has created commercials and ad campaigns for Taco Bell, Doritos, Carl's Jr., BMW, Earthlink, Microsoft, Whole Foods, Green Burrito, and Cuties. He's authored everything from online guerrilla marketing efforts for small clients to national campaigns for global automotive companies like Kia Motors. Josh has been part of Mad Men since its first season. He worked closely with Matt Weiner and the show's writers and producers to ensure that Mad Men accurately depicted the process of creating ads and servicing clients. He also created most of the original ad scene in the show. Josh's first book, Seducing Strangers, The Little Black Book of Advertising Secrets, is a great read. We have them here for sale today, and we're going to be talking about that for the first part of the interview. We'll talk about the show for a little bit and then turn it over to you guys for all your wonderful questions. So here we go.
All right.
I'm going to begin with the question, okay? The biggest one. It's all downhill from here.
How does it end, right?
Exactly.
How does Mad Men end?
That's a good one.
I can't tell you.
Try to do no spoilers today.
All right.
What is happiness? We talk about it with each other all the time. We ask ourselves the question. I'm sitting here with an ad man. What is happiness?
I think happiness, let's see, I wrote it down. Happiness is when reality meets or exceeds expectations. That's what I think happiness is.
That's it.
I think that's pretty good, yeah.
Okay. Does it matter what we have or what we don't have in terms of happiness, or?
I don't think what we have or don't have makes as big a difference as what we have or don't have. Well, of course, after basic needs are met, you know. What makes a lot of difference is what we have or don't have vis-a-vis what we expect to have, you know, okay. That sort of thing. I think people, I think that's what makes people happy.
Okay. So as a marketer, how do you actually go about, I guess, managing expectations, setting expectations? What's that process like?
Well, I think that the process from an advertising point of view is to try and figure out what it is your prospect wants, and then figure out how your products can deliver on that. You know, what do they expect from their life? What do they expect from the things they buy? What do they expect from, you know, an experience with your company or brand?
Okay.
And then figure out if your products and services are in line with your customers' expectations, and what needs to change to bring them into alignment, either their expectations or your products and services.
Okay, so is that an explicit thing that gets discussed around the table?
Sure.
You know, like we need to set people's expectations different, or is it more of a subtle skill that really great ad men, ad women have?
I think that's most of the meetings that I attended were about. I remember one campaign that is actually still running. I worked on it maybe 15 years ago. It was a campaign for hamburgers called Carl's Jr. And at the time, when we first picked up the project, the burgers were known as big sloppy messes that were as close to a mistake as you could ever receive from a drive-through window. I mean, there's stuff coming out of them and lettuce and things like that. And, you know, they were kind of a disaster. And then we went in and talked to focus groups about what people wanted from a hamburger. And we were talking specifically to 18 to 34-year-old men who had between $4 and $6 to spend at lunch every day. And, you know, they tended to be working people and hungry people. And every one of them, every one of these groups that we taped, these guys would be sitting around and they'd start talking about the burger that made them happy, and they'd be making this gesture. Like, they'd turn into these animals, and they'd talk about it's drippy, it's, you know, it's like bloody and stuff like that. And when we took the tape to the client, we turned the sound off because we said, you know, you're creating these ads now that talk about how clean the restaurant is and how how whatchamacallit, decent the ingredients are, and you're trying to satisfy that animal that you see on the screen that's doing, you know, this caveman kind of guy. And we said, we're not going to change the product. That thing that we've been delivering, that messy in the bag, they want that, you know. What we're going to do is we're going to start promising that to them, because what was out of whack was the customer's desire was not in line with the promise that the company was making about their product. They had the product. They had exactly what they wanted, this big, messy, drippy thing. And so instead of changing it, we recognized that that's what we started speaking the language of the people who were hungry.
Made them happy in the process.
Made them really happy in the process, made the company over in the process, made the owners of the company really happy. You know, a lot of people got happy.
That's good stuff. Okay. You're in business making people happy. I like it. All right, another big definition question. The book is called Seducing Strangers.
Yes. What
is seduction?
I think seduction is figuring out what people want to hear about themselves and telling them just that. That you figure out what people are itching for, and basically you scratch it. That's seducing.
Telling people what they want to hear. That's the
telling people what they want to hear is, if you want to know how to seduce, I think that's how you do it.
All right. How does this apply in advertising? How does this work in the real world?
I don't particularly know how it works in the real world. I'm not good at it one-on-one. You know, I'm very bad at it one-on-one because I'm not the type of person that's willing to change who I am to be satisfying or to make other people happy personally. But I seem to have a really good talent for figuring out what large groups of people want to hear about themselves and being able to tell stories that they can see themselves in, that satisfy themselves. So it depends on what part of the real world you're talking about.
So let's talk about advertising.
Okay.
You're talking about, we talked about making people happy. Now we're talking about affirming people as they are.
Right.
Can you talk about an ad you've worked on or a story in advertising that reflects that?
That affirms what people...
Well, you're saying seduction is telling people what they want to hear. How do ads do that, is my question.
Well...
Or I could have a salad, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's actually a good one to talk about, because that one worked counterintuitively. I worked on a product, I don't know if anyone's ever been to Green Burrito. It's really not ready to be advertised. But contractually, we had to. And it's a long story. But so a bunch of us from the agency went to try out the product, and it was sort of a fast food Mexican type thing. And we went there and were completely disappointed. A lot of things were made using the microwave, you know, and this sort of thing. And at the time we said, you know, take your $1 million ad budget and work on your menu. Get it ready to, because there's an old advertising adage, nothing will kill a bad product quicker than good advertising. You make people come in, they try it, they'll be disappointed, you'll never see them again. But the client was insisting that they wanted to spend their $1 million, which was about 1/14 of what the other big Mexican food player in the market was spending annually. So they were outspent 14-1. They didn't have a very good product, but still they said, you know, can you do something for us? We really want to advertise. Okay. We came up with a little singing green dot in a black field, and the little dot would say things like, if it's green, it's good. If it's bluish green, you're going to need shots. And then it would cut to the logo and say, green burrito, if it's green, it's good. And we talked, and one of the other ads, I think, said, if you get guacamole on a green burrito, it's good. If you get guacamole on your lip, it looks like boogers. Green burrito, it's good. So anyhow, what we did was we said that the food is so bad that by talking about gangrene and boogers, we could lower expectations to a level that your products may be able to meet or exceed. And that was the only thing that we could really recommend the client do in good conscience. And we did, and they did it, and it kind of worked. You know, not a lot of people went to the restaurant for that year, but they all knew this little talking dot. They were very, you know, the audience knew that. As a matter of fact, I think after spending $1 million that year, the company had achieved parity awareness with the other company, the competitor that was spending $14 million. So we had achieved awareness. We hadn't set anybody's expectations really high, and you know, we solved the problem. But that's sort of a counterintuitive, lower the bar kind of success story.
Look, the question was about seduction. All I take away about seduction is
we
gangrene
seduced with gangrene and boogers.
Gangrene and boogers. Okay, seduction.
Seduction.
All right, so this is I want to talk a little bit just about some of the specifics in the book. Couple of quotes from the book. Advertising is not about changing the audience's beliefs or the things that drive them. It's about confirming them. Nobody needs to lie about how rewarding a product is or isn't. You just need to remind people who feel they deserve a reward that they're absolutely right to feel this way. And then my favorite, sure. It's mostly about persuading people to do a little more of what they're already doing. Yeah. The money is in telling people they're right and to keep doing what they're doing, preferably with your particular brand, product, or service in mind. So I think the obvious question there, what if what people think, do, feel, and believe is wrong or it's harmful to them? How do you respond to questions about, I guess, the moral compass you have when you are trying to get people to do something one way or another?
Let's see. Okay, let's just go with the one we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, which is getting people to eat hamburgers and bad Mexican food, which I spent a lot of my career doing. What we talked about before is, you know, most of the time, I'm not the dumbest person in the room. Sometimes, a lot of the times, I'm not the smartest person in the room. But I do know when lunchtime comes around, I like to choose what I want to choose. I don't particularly feel like the smartest person in the room should be choosing what they think I should eat for lunch. You know, I think what I said when we were talking beforehand is, you know, I understand why society has laws that protect people from products that are dangerous to society under the best of circumstances. But I don't particularly think we need laws or regulations that protect individuals from risky products, the products that are risky under the worst circumstances. I think that's what being an individual is about evaluating. You know, so I don't think it's about lying or deceiving. I think it's the difference between products or things that are always dangerous to everybody versus things that can sometimes be dangerous to individuals. You know, I think those things have to be looked at differently. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. Okay, very good. Just one or two more questions about advertising before we talk about the show. What are enthymemes? That was interesting. And how does it work with our dopamine, our adrenaline? I'd be curious to hear more about that.
There's a section in the book where I talk about a thing called enthymeme. And an enthymeme is a thing that Aristotle refers to in a book called Rhetoric. And it's basically, the translation is within the mind. And when I was about 25, I was reading this book while taking my first class in advertising and learning how to come up with concepts that were intriguing and arresting to people. And I came across this line that said, when using this enthymeme technique to try and engage somebody, here's how it works. The first part of the phrase confuses. If the first part of the phrase confuses, the second part explains. If the first part explains, the second part confuses. And this discord, people trying to figure this out, is what engages their mind in a speaker's argument. And the example I use in the book is that Samuel Johnson could have said, there are a lot of things to do or see in London. But what he said was, when a man is tired of London, he's tired of life. And the first part sort of confuses, and the second part explains, and you're engaged as you go through the beginning of this thing to the end of the thing. And I think that modern advertising sort of started in the mid-'60s when someone discovered that if the picture confuses, the headline explains, and if the headline confuses, the picture explains. And using images and words together in this fashion is sort of a modern enthymeme to engage people in an image that was used to stop them from flipping through a magazine, get them interested in a television commercial, make them stare at a poster on the street. But this technique has been being used for the last 40 years to engage people's heads.
It's interesting, we were talking about the way Aristotle mentions its rhetoric. This enthymeme gets you to listen to a speaker or to get more tuned into what the speaker's saying. I was thinking about a magazine, endless pages, you're flipping, you're seeing a lot of stuff you expect, articles, images, words trying to sell things to you. And I remember a classic ad I think they refer to in the show is Volkswagen ad for, I think, the Beetle. It's a tiny little car on this big white page. The ad itself is very small. It's a lot of wasted space. And I think the tagline is "Think Small."
Right.
And is that what you're talking about? It
yeah, exactly.
Confuses you, catches your attention?
Imagine, you know, we talked about it in the show, you're flipping through this magazine circa 1961 and you come across this big empty white page with a little teeny car and your head is going, what is this? This should not be here. This is confusing. What are they trying to say? Is this a mistake? Where's the rest of the stuff that goes on the page? Oh, think small. I get it. I'm engaged. I see that they're trying to say that it's about being different or being unexpected or being unique or whatever that is. But for that fraction of a second, when somebody's trying to resolve that confusion, you have an opportunity as a seller of goods and services to engage them in a discussion. They're open because they're trying to figure something out.
And I think you also, last thing on this point, you mentioned adrenaline and dopamine specifically get released in this process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what your head is doing, I don't know, but I've read articles like everybody else. Like I'm not a doctor, but when you're confused, it's that fight or flight. You're trying to figure it out, and then when the tumblers fall in your mind, you feel that reward. I've felt it trying to come up with ideas. I know when I've solved a puzzle and what that feels like, and I think that it's the combination of chemicals that make you feel that way going off in your head. That's the reason that an enthymeme, literally translated from Greek, means in your mind. It's happening in your head.
Let's talk about Mad Men.
All right.
So for those of you watching on YouTube, we took a quick look at a clip. I think it's episode 13 of season 1, the Carousel. Feel free to look it up. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I'd love to know, I'm sure a lot of folks here too as well, how were these pitches created for this show? What was the process? Could you walk us through that?
One of the things, Matt Weiner, if you're familiar with the show, Matt Weiner is the showrunner, the person who invented Mad Men. He's a stickler for accuracy, and early on, we were friends, or we're still friends, but we were just friends before he had a show on television. And he was talking about advertising, and we said, to be accurate about creating ads, ads are created by, in the agency environment at that time, a team of an art director working with a writer, the pictures and the words working together to come up with a concept the way I was just describing. Typically advertising, shows based in the advertising world, movies based in the advertising world, before Mad Men, a writer would write the script and they'd march the script down to the art department, and the art department would make up the ad the way they make up any other prop. And that's how you got advertised. And Matt recognized that we would probably get more accurate ads if the writer's room began working the way real agencies did. And I'm an art director by background, and he brought me in 1 day a week to work on the business stories and the concept for ads with the writers as they happened, and that's how
Could you walk us through maybe how the carousel came about?
At the end of season 1, the main character, Don Draper, has had his marriage is breaking up, his business is falling apart, his brother has just committed suicide, and Matt said, we need a business story or a product that explains, lets the audience see what Don is feeling about his marriage, his business, his brother's suicide. And that's sort of a tough, I'm not sure there are a lot of products like that, but one of the things that I used to do before going into the writer's room to work with the writers and stuff is I would leaf through the PDFs of the New York Times advertising section of the week that the story on the show was taking place in. So if it was October of 1961, I'd read the advertising column in the New York Times, and I noticed that Kodak was working on a slide projector, or there was something, and I checked and saw that it came out the next year. It was called the Carousel. I figured whatever they were doing at the time in real life was probably happening about that time, with a year, kind of thing. And I remember my father, in the 60s, cameras and film and Super 8 cameras and hi-fi equipment, they were the high-tech gadgets of their time. And these guys, like Don Draper, spent a lot of time with photographic equipment, single lens reflex cameras, all that sort of thing. And I thought maybe he did what my dad did, which is have a bunch of slides of trips and in the closet and sort through them. And if we could use some of his slides from his life in a pitch, we could understand what he was feeling about his business, his marriage, his life in general. And so that's what we brought in. We probably could have done the same thing with, if the product had been a Super 8 movie camera or something like that. Anything where he could have used his own images in the sales pitch to the client. But the slide projector worked really well.
So one of the taglines for the show is "Where the Truth Lies," and you write that the main insight into Don's character and the most important conceit of the show is that Don Draper can lie anywhere except in advertising. And why is that?
He's lying to his wife, he's lying to his kids, he's lying to he lies to everybody, he lies to himself. But it was very important to Matt Weiner that Don, as the main character, be good at his job. He thought that the audience needed him to be good at something, to respect him on some level, or else all this other stuff that he was doing, no one would stick with it. It was just too dark. And so I felt that what we were looking at was a guy who could lie anywhere except in the advertising. In the advertising, he's basing his work on truthful insights that he has into people. He obviously understands what makes people tick very well, or he couldn't write good ads, and that makes his own kind of internal struggle to understand what's motivating him and what makes him tick even more poignant.
I see. So I wonder, are there Don Drapers out there? Are there people who just walk into a pitch like that and just...
Oh, and kill? Yeah, sure.
Like that.
Not as often and consistently as a guy who's working in front of clients who will do exactly what 12 smart writers tell the clients to do, But yeah, he's kind of based on an amalgam of people who are really good salesmen who understand how people tick.
He's a composite.
Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's 30 different writers who have working in the writer's room since the beginning of the show. They all bring different experiences to Don, and there's all sorts of different stories about ad men that me and Bob Levinson, the other advertising consultant, would bring into the room. There's all sorts of books about different advertising people that all the writers, were expected to read. Matt had done extensive research. People knew, what good salesmen were like, and we just took whatever worked and created, like, you know, Frankenstein, the ultimate ad guy, you know, bits and pieces from everywhere.
So one of my favorite comments about the show, I think it was the week of the last episode, so Matt Weiner was being interviewed, and he said that the show Mad Men is about what people want, what they can get, and how happiness lies somewhere in between.
Sure.
And it reminded me of what you talked about happiness being, is this difference between expectation and reality. Could you talk about that in relation to the show?
Yeah, I think that's what the story is about. I think it's about trying to bridge that gap between a man's expectations and his reality, you know, and every story is the story of how someone got something or didn't get something that they desired. You know, and that's what we're watching, or that's what we watched over the course of 8 seasons of Mad Men. How does he get the life he thinks he wants, or how does he get what makes him feel happy?
I see. Well, I've got questions for days, but I'd love to take some from the audience if you guys are curious at all. There's a mic right in the middle.
I'll ask one. So my question is, would you see advertising in utopia? And so going back to that expectation around advertising, could we see the explosion of ways of advertising as a barometer for us getting farther from utopia?
Okay, would there be advertising in utopia? You mean where everybody's happy? Do we need?
There's no expectation.
If there's no expectation, I don't know. It's a tough one. I was thinking about that kind of when I saw Tomorrowland come out, you know, because I think that what's missing a lot from people's lives today are basically somebody's vision of where we should be heading. You know, it sounds cute that, you know, when you think of Walt Disney building Tomorrowland, and when I was little, how you'd go to the Monsanto exhibit of the Kitchen of Tomorrow and all that sort of stuff. And it was kind of funky, but it made you feel good that we were heading somewhere, you know, that those expectations were, they may be right, they may be wrong, they may be whatever, but they were shared by so many people, and we had this idea that we were all kind of heading towards this one direction. And I think that, you know, people's vision of the future and their expectation is so fragmented. It doesn't feel like there's any one person or group of visionary thinkers who are saying, yeah, maybe let's get together for the World's Fair of 2018 and lay out where we're going, you know. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but yeah, I think you really do need expectations, and I think that the angst going on today, or part of it, is that people don't know where we're heading.
Yeah, so when you talk about Don Draper as a profile of an ideal madman in his time, 2 questions. How did you put yourself in that era? Was there much of an adjustment? And secondly, what is the profile of today, and how might it be different? Do we value different things in a person of a successful
in a persuader
person?
I don't even think we call them successful advertising people anymore. You know, it's sort of a, because advertising is sort of in such a state of transition and flux, you know, it's hard to think of what makes advertising successful nowadays, and it's hard to think of someone who feels successful doing it. I had a friend say, maybe 6 months ago, you know, a seasoned ad person who a very good writer and good at his job, and he was talking and lamenting the place that he worked spends a lot of time sort of talking about creating experiences rather than tools of persuasion. And he said, you know, we used to make tools for clients, and now we make toys. You know, we used to really think about what the messages that we were making, what they were supposed to do, what the payoff was supposed to be. I talk a lot about that in the book, because with each of those 4 different types of ads, there's a different metric involved, you know, and you knew what you were trying to do, and you knew if you were making progress. But oh, and the error on the was. Yeah, that one, I really didn't think things had changed a lot between when I was working, even 2010, and I'll tell you the big moment that was really different. I remember in 1989 when the big advertising conglomerate that I was working for sent out a memo that said they were no longer going to expense liquor at lunch. and one of the old copywriters, a really genius guy, who had been doing it for a long, long time, came and sat down in my office, and I was, the young 20-something guy, and he was really had been doing it since like the 40s, 50s, or 50s at least. But just a genius copy, and he says, that's it, that's the end of this. He says, and he didn't, I'll tell you how he meant it, but he said, what kind of person would approve this stuff sober? And he didn't mean that the account guys were getting the clients drunk at lunch to try and pull something over on them, but he was trying to say, look, when you're trying to do something edgy or exciting or engaging or something that can't be rationalized, in a cost-benefit type of way, you got to make these guys brave, and that's what the liquor did. And after that, people were much more tentative and sort of what was, I never heard the phrase risk averse until they said they weren't going to expense liquor at lunch. I'll just put it that way. Yeah.
How you doing? I'm John. I'm from the YouTube marketing team, and I gotta say, Mad Men is as much a case study for us in some respects as it is like an episodic thing. We talk about it a lot at work, and a lot of fans at YouTube and at Google wide. My question was, I was hoping you could help me kind of sort through a moral dilemma I sometimes think about when it comes to marketing, and I talk about this with friends who are on the agency side and go through this as well. And I wonder, what do you think about how advertising and the need for it has led to materialism and consumerism in the world today? Like, I feel like a lot of us tend to buy things that maybe we don't need, and and being in marketing and having friends in advertising, sometimes we think about, are we pushing messages that we don't believe in? Are we selling products that maybe people don't need? And how can
I know what you're asking.
Taco Bell story. I'm trying to say that.
No, the first day that I went into the writer's room on Mad Men, I remember I brought in 3 pieces of paper. They're now hanging in the Museum of Moving Images in New York with the set, or not the set, the whole writer's room has moved there. But on one of them, it said, scary. There are big corporations out there that are, what was it? One sec, it's scary. There are big corporations out there who are controlling what you think and what you feel and making you buy things that leave you broke and feeling empty. And then it said, scarier. There are no big corporations out there controlling what you think, feel, and making you buy things that leave you broke and feeling empty. That it's kind of in your head. I think that people believe that they can make their life better. I don't think I put that belief there. I don't think you put that belief there. I think that's the human condition, that we believe things that can be better. I think that the problem is that we think things that we buy, we think that better can be bought, and usually it can't be. You got to sort of look at who you are and what you're asking for and those sort of things. Kind of thing. So I don't think that the desire to make your life better is something that's instilled, that's caused consumerism. I think that what causes consumerism is thinking that stuff that you can consume will make you feel better about life. And that's not what, the advertisers aren't planting that thought in people. There's a lot of reasons that I think that exists. And it's about people finding what truly makes them happy, and not the stuff that's being advertised or how it'll make them happy.
I'm just curious if I could follow up. Do you know why, or do you have a thought as to why consumerism is higher today than it was before?
Well, I mean, consumerism of some things are, what specifically? Because I don't know. I think there's more people with, you know, like when I was coming up, China was not, you know, consuming the same sort of things that they are now. Yeah. But I know the stuff that they were consuming wasn't making them particularly happy. They wanted to have what you have. They wanted cars and city life and choices in, you know, the supermarket and stuff like that. So they think they're consuming stuff for the same reason you do. They think this stuff will make it happy. Maybe it will. Maybe I don't know. You know, the more we dissatisfied with the stuff we got, we try and improve it and get new stuff. You know, I think.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
So storytelling is very in vogue today in business and speaking. Can you take us where your vision is on storytelling, you know, in the next 10 years? What should we be thinking about? Or is it really the same from Don Draper's time, today, and tomorrow?
I think that a lot of the difference between the industrial economy and the knowledge economy is that in the industrial economy, managers that could manage things that could be measured, like time, space, and energy, were really the ones that made a huge difference in the price of goods and the profitability of companies. You know, then in the information economy, there's sort of goods, services, and ideas that can't be quantified or measured, and those things are sort of since they can't be measured, they're really more about, how do I say this? They're really more about stories and the emotional connections between those things. So I think the more our economy becomes more based on goods, services, and ideas, things that can't be quantified, measured, or really managed in the same way that measurable things are managed, storytelling becomes more important. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just two more questions here.
Hi, I wanted to get your opinion on what you think the story behind Mad Men really means. Like, what is the main message that the show is trying to convey to its audience through the journey of Don Draper?
How does it end?
You know, I couldn't possibly answer that. It's so different being inside, you know, the like eye of the storm and working to put it together than, and I think it's really best if people like me who are in there leave it up to other people to, you know, to get what they get. That's sometimes I got what Matt got, and sometimes I didn't get what the writers got, or I got something completely different. I mean, I'm just like you. When I see it on TV, it's like, oh my God, you know, that's it sure doesn't feel when it's put together and you're looking at it like it did when you were trying to make it. I don't know.
Yeah. Perhaps a different way to ask the question is, what has his journey meant for you personally over the time that you've worked on it?
Oh, it's been just fantastic to go with him on it. You know, I got to find out so much about so many smart people, and it was like a graduate course in human behavior. And you know, to work on anything that successfully connects with a lot of people is just satisfying in every way. You know, that's great. Thanks.
Last question for you, Josh. We're at a tech company, and you talk about tech companies in the book. You say that they fall prey to throwing things over the wall, and you actually mentioned Google, which I love. What is it in? No, it's great.
Okay.
You actually mentioned the first product I worked on here. What do tech companies do when they throw it over the wall? What does that mean?
The first time I heard the phrase "throw it over the wall" was when I was creative director on Microsoft, and what that meant was bringing a product to market because you can, without necessarily thinking about why or how you're going to get people to buy it. You know, it's making it. You know, bringing it to market because you can make it, rather than bringing it to market because you think you can make people buy it. You know, so without considering that. Sometimes things fall flat, you know. It doesn't really.
How does a tech company make people buy it? How do you create that itch?
I think a high-tech company, I think the hardest thing or the most important thing to do is to sort of keep control of the metaphor. I think the metaphor being sort of what it's like, what the product is like in the real world, you know. IBM spent a lot of money 10, 15 years ago advertising e-business. You know, e-business was the metaphor. It was the idea of business done online.
Okay.
None of the machines or the software that allowed business to be done online really existed.
Yeah.
So the money was spent so that IBM would be the company that controlled what it meant to do business online.
Okay.
By showing people a story, a fiction, of what it looked like when so-and-so in Poland could create a cheese shop and post it and get an order from someone in tenant. Before any of this could actually happen, you know, you had to create that Tomorrowland, that vision of the future, that's where we're going.
Did Google ever do this, do you think?
Yeah, I think Google did it. I was telling you the story of the first time I heard Google did it when they came up with the name Google, you know. Because I can remember like it was yesterday, the first time I heard somebody say in an agency, go Google that. I didn't know what they meant, you know. I thought they could have been telling me to go fuck myself or something like that. I mean, what do you mean go Google it? And when they said, you know, there's this thing on the internet that'll answer any question, you know, it made me very curious to find out more about that, because suddenly there was someone in the office who had a tool that I didn't have. They had an edge. They had all the answers in the world.
An Enthymeme.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had to go and check that out. And it was having a word for a product and a service that had never existed before, and calling it something that I had never heard before, that made me absolutely have to scratch that itch. I couldn't allow there to be another person in the agency who knew about this valuable thing or wonderful thing that I didn't know about. So yeah.
Now you scratched a couple times a day, I take it.
Yeah, lots.
Okay. Josh Weltman's first book, Seducing Strangers, available in the back. It's a great read. Josh, thanks for coming to Google.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.